The music was too loud for anyone to hear what I was thinking, but not loud enough to cover what I said out loud. "Hey, Jules, want to tell him whose name is still on the mortgage?" Yeah, that's what I said. Right as her so-called coworker spun her around, like we were all extras in some cheap Netflix romance. The DJ froze. The lights didn't. Everyone else did. You could feel the sound drop out of the room, like someone sucked the air out of it. A couple of phones came up. A few fake coughs. Her hands dropped from his shoulders like they'd suddenly started burning. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I was done blinking. "Let's back up." Not far, just 15 minutes earlier. She told me to wait by the appetizers. I remember that clearly because I was standing next to a tray of pickled carrots when I watched her lean in and whisper something in his ear. Then they both laughed. Not normal laughter. That closed-mouth kind, like they had some inside joke, and I was the outside. 3 minutes later, he reached for her hand. 3 minutes. Like I wasn't even there. Like I hadn't helped her mom move apartments last week because he was busy with client meetings. Like I hadn't forgiven the hotel charge from Boston last month that showed up under the name Tremont Luxe Spa. 2 guests. I'm not dumb. I'm not confrontational either. I usually let things sit. Boil. Rock quietly in my chest while I tell myself I'm just overthinking again. But tonight was different. Something about watching the man she swore was just a team lead pull her onto a dance floor like he owned the room. That did something to me. Like my spine finally got tired of being bent. I let them have their little swirl. I even gave them the first verse of the song. Let them settle into the lie. Then I walked across the floor. My shoes echoed, even over the beat. And when I stood right beside them, close enough to smell his citrus cologne, I didn't raise my voice. I just said it. "Hey, Jules, want to tell him whose name is still on the mortgage?" And in that moment, she looked at me like I was the stranger. She looked at me like he was the one she'd come with. And just like that, the party changed. Forever. Nobody moved at first. Not even him. Dorian stood there, still holding my wife's hand like the music hadn't stopped, like the moment hadn't just shattered into 1,000 shards under our feet. Jules didn't say anything either. Her eyes flicked to mine, then back to his, like she was calculating damage in real time. Like she was waiting to see who would flinch first. But she underestimated one thing. I had nothing left to lose in that moment. Because the truth is, I didn't just find out about them tonight. No, I'd known for 46 days. 46 days of pretending not to notice the new phone password, the late client dinners, the sudden obsession with Pilates. 46 days of eating microwave leftovers alone while she stayed out building campaigns. 46 days of pretending the couch didn't smell like cologne I don't wear. I waited because I needed proof. Because I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who burned down his marriage over a hunch. I tracked things. Quietly. Patterns. Calls. A parking garage charge in a part of the city she never had meetings in. A Lyft receipt that dropped her off 6 blocks from our house at midnight. A hotel key card that fell out of her coat pocket when she tossed it on the kitchen chair. But tonight was different. Tonight, she gave me the gift of her betrayal in public. On a silver platter, in front of her coworkers, in front of me, in front of Dorian, who still hadn't let go of her hand. "You're embarrassing yourself," Jules finally said, pulling her fingers free. Her voice was sharp but shaky, like she still couldn't tell if I was bluffing or losing my mind. I stepped closer, lowered my voice just enough so only the two of them could hear. "You know what's embarrassing?" I whispered. "Telling your mom we couldn't come to Thanksgiving because we're traveling for work, when really, you were in a hotel with him drinking minibar wine and ordering room service for 2. Jules went pale. Dorian took a step back, eyes narrowing, finally realizing this wasn't just an awkward misunderstanding. This was exposure. I looked up. Half the room was staring. The other half was pretending not to. The music still hadn't started again. The DJ looked frozen behind his booth, hands hovering awkwardly over the controls like he was waiting for someone to give him permission to breathe. "You should go," I said to Dorian. Calmly. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. That's what made it worse, the calm. To his credit, he didn't argue. He just gave Jules one long, loaded look, then turned and walked off into the crowd. No apology. No confrontation. Just a quiet, humiliating exit that left my wife standing in front of me, stunned and suddenly very, very alone. She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said. Don't insult both of us by pretending this is the first time it's gotten messy. And then I turned and walked toward the elevator. I didn't run. I didn't slam doors or cause a scene. I just left her standing there, in her perfect dress, in front of her perfect colleagues, under those perfect rooftop lights, holding the shards of the lie she'd carefully built. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew it wouldn't involve pretending anymore. When I stepped into the apartment, it was quiet, too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet you get after a long day, but the tense, humming kind that presses into your chest like a held breath. I tossed my keys onto the counter and stood there for a few seconds, letting the darkness settle around me. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I knew this place by feel. The chipped tile by the fridge, the loose board near the hallway, the corner of the kitchen table that always snagged my belt loop. It was our home. It still looked like our home, but I no longer recognized what lived inside it. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. The ache in my chest had dulled into something heavier, not grief, not anger, just a kind of weight. I walked into the bedroom, opened the top drawer of her nightstand, and pulled out the thing I swore I wouldn't use. The second phone. I found it 2 weeks ago, hidden behind a stack of travel magazines she hadn't touched in years. It had no case, no lock screen, just a clean slate of text threads and late-night calls. I didn't confront her when I found it. I told myself I wasn't ready. The truth is, I was waiting for the right moment to make her feel what I felt. That crawling sense of betrayal you can't scrub off your skin. Tonight had been that moment. And now, standing in the dark, I powered it on and watched the screen come to life like a ghost rising. There were 47 unread messages. The most recent was from D. You looked unreal tonight. I hate that he was there. Let's talk when you get home. I let out a bitter laugh. He hated that I was there? At my wife's party? In the life I helped her build? There was something so absurd about it all, like I was the intruder in my own story. I didn't reply. I didn't delete anything. I just set the phone down, opened the window, and let the cold air slap me awake. And then came the knock. Not the front door. The back. Which was strange. We lived on the 3rd floor, and the back entrance was only used by delivery people or neighbors sneaking out for smoke breaks. I hesitated, walked quietly through the kitchen, and peeked through the curtain. It was Nina. I hadn't seen her in weeks. Jules's old friend, the one who stopped coming around after the two of them had a falling out over some personal boundary drama. At the time, Jules played it down, said Nina was judgy and too intense. I always liked Nina. She asked real questions. She looked you in the eye when you answered. I opened the door. She didn't say hello. Didn't even ask if she could come in. She just walked straight past me, tossed her coat on the chair, and turned to face me like she'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had. You know now, don't you? She said. I nodded slowly. I knew before tonight, I admitted. But tonight confirmed it. Nina folded her arms. Good. Then I can finally tell you the rest. My blood ran cold. I sat down without a word, and she followed. And that's when she said it. That's when she told me something about Dorian that made everything, the party, the texts, even the hotel keycard, seem small. Because what she revealed had been going on a lot longer than I thought. And it involved more than just my wife. Nina didn't waste time with disclaimers or warm-up stories. She spoke with the kind of exhausted certainty that only comes from carrying a secret too long. Like she had rehearsed this moment 100 times alone in her apartment, waiting for someone, anyone, to finally be ready to hear it. I didn't stop coming around because Jules and I argued. She began, her voice low, careful. I stopped coming around because I found her in someone else's apartment. I stared at her, confused. Whose? She didn't blink. Dorian's. I let the silence hang between us for a second, even though that part didn't exactly shock me. I had already assumed that part. Hell, I watched them dance like no one else was in the room just hours ago. But Nina kept going. That was almost a year ago. Now that stopped me. A year. I repeated. But she only started working with him 6 months ago. Nina leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees like she was trying to press the truth closer to me. He wasn't her coworker then. He was mine. Suddenly, everything warped. My mind reeled like someone had cut gravity loose in the room. I tried to latch onto that detail, but it didn't make sense. I looked at her, waiting for the punchline, the clarification, but none came. You worked with him? She nodded. Briefly. I was part of a strategy firm before I switched careers. He came on as a contractor. Real charmer. Always accidentally touching people's arms when he talked. Remembered everyone's birthdays. Wore those perfect fitted button-ups. Classic manipulator energy. People loved him. And Jules. Nina looked away for a moment, then met my eyes again. They hit it off immediately. I noticed the way she looked at him, like she was starving and he was the buffet. I didn't say anything at first, but then I walked in on them at an off-site we were hosting in the city. The venue was half closed for renovation, and I went back to grab my bag from the green room. And there they were, her dress half-zipped, his belt undone, whispering things like they were alone in the world. My stomach twisted. I felt hot, angry, humiliated all over again. And you didn't tell me? I tried, she said, sounding defensive now. But I knew what it would look like. I thought you wouldn't believe me. Or worse, that you would, and still stay. That one hit harder than it should have. And maybe she was right. Back then, I probably would have begged Jules for a half-hearted apology and pretended we could rebuild something that already had termites in the foundation. I stood up and paced the room, breathing hard, while Nina watched me silently, giving me space. The worst part wasn't just that Jules cheated. The worst part was how methodically she'd rewritten the entire timeline, planting fake stories, editing the past, rehearsing lies while holding my hand at dinner parties. She changed jobs to follow him? I asked, finally piecing it together. She jumped companies just to be around him more? Not just that, Nina said slowly. He's done this before. He did it to someone else at my old job too. Another woman. Married. High-ranking. He gets close, gets what he wants, and then moves on, or worse, stays, just to ruin everything around them. He's a professional chaos artist. My mind was racing. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a pattern, a plan. And Jules had either been too blind to see it or too far gone to care. I sat back down, the exhaustion creeping into my bones. She's on her way home, I muttered, glancing at the clock. She'll walk in like nothing happened. Like this was just another messy night. So what are you going to do? Nina asked. And I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I didn't know. Not yet. But I knew this. When she walked through that door, I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to ask her why. I was going to let her talk. And then I was going to flip the story. I heard the keys before I saw the door move. The lock turned slower than usual, like she was giving me a few seconds to brace myself. As if she knew I'd still be awake. And she was right. I hadn't sat down once since Nina left. I had just been standing in the kitchen like a ghost in my own home, arms crossed. Every light turned off except the one over the sink, casting shadows across the counter where I'd laid out her second phone, face up. The door creaked open. At first, I thought she was alone. She stepped inside quietly, heels in hand, the hem of her green dress bunched in her fist like it was choking her wrist. She looked around like she expected something. A shout, a smashed glass, a suitcase by the door. But I didn't give her that. I stayed in the shadows, letting her settle into the dread. Then I heard it, the second set of footsteps. He came in behind her. Dorian. I actually smiled. Not from joy, but from the absurdity, the audacity. He followed her in like he had done this before, like he belonged here. Like the last 5 hours hadn't just detonated their secrecy in public. He had changed shirts. His hair was damp, probably rinsed his guilt off in a sink somewhere. And then, with the calm of someone who thought he had the upper hand, he said, I think we should talk. Not Jules. Him. She looked between us like we were two opposing currents, and she was the wire stretched between. But she didn't speak. She just dropped her heels, leaned against the wall, and waited. I didn't move. I wanted to see how far this would go, how much deeper they'd dig the grave. Dorian stepped forward. Look, I know you're angry. I cut him off with a raised hand. Stop. Just. Don't. He frowned. We didn't mean for it to happen this way. I tried to stay away. I laughed. Loud, but not joyful. Tried to stay away? You've been in my house. Used my towels. Sat on my couch. He went quiet. Jules finally spoke. Her voice was small, rehearsed. Merrill, I didn't bring him here to hurt you. I brought him here because this, pretending, it's worse. I didn't want to lie anymore. I turned to her fully now, stepping out of the kitchen light. My face must have looked dead behind the eyes because I saw her flinch a little, like she'd forgotten I could still feel something. So what? I asked. You brought him here like some twisted guest star? Were we supposed to sit down and work through this together? Like a team? Dorian opened his mouth again, but I spoke first. You know she's not the only one, right? He blinked. What? I pointed to her phone on the counter. I've read it all, and I've talked to someone else. Nina. Remember her? Now Jules reacted. Her eyes widened, and I swear for a second she lost her balance. She came by, I continued. Told me about the last woman. Before Jules. And the one before that. Told me how you slip into people's lives like mold. Slowly. Quietly. Until everything rots from the inside. Dorian's jaw tightened. He turned to Jules, but she was already shaking her head. You told me she was crazy, she whispered. He didn't answer. I could see her face start to crack, the realization slowly sliding into her like a knife. That she wasn't special. That she wasn't some grand love story. That she was just next. You told her you'd leave me, I said, this time to Jules. And I bet you told the last one the same thing. But the only thing either of you ever left behind was evidence. She started to cry. Small, controlled sobs, like she didn't want to let it all go at once. Dorian stayed still. He knew what this was now. Not a negotiation. A reckoning. Here's what's going to happen, I said, suddenly steady. You're going to leave. Both of you. Right now. You're going to go to whatever hotel he's parked himself in this time. And I'm going to pack a few things. And when I come back tomorrow, you won't be here. There'll be a lawyer's letter in your inbox by noon. Merrill. Jules started, but I raised a hand again. No, you don't get to speak anymore. You got months. I get tonight. For once, she didn't argue. She picked up her shoes, walked to the door. Dorian followed. No one looked back. The door closed, and I stood there in the same silence I'd started the night with. Except now, the silence didn't hurt. It felt clean, like the sound right before a new beginning. The morning after didn't feel like a morning. It felt like fallout. I woke up on the couch with my neck at an awkward angle and sunlight creeping across the floor like it was trying not to disturb anything. For the first few seconds, I actually forgot where I was. Then I remembered the silence. The door. Her leaving. Him. The way she didn't fight it. I hadn't slept much. My mind was chewing on itself all night, stuck in loops, replaying conversations with new meanings. Old moments now infected by what I knew. The client retreats. The mysterious perfume on her scarf. That one time she came home late and stood too long in the shower, longer than usual. I had let so much go. I had trained myself not to ask. And now, here I was, on the other end of the lie, trying to gather the strength to finish the story I didn't start. I made coffee. It tasted like guilt. I didn't drink it. Instead, I grabbed a duffel bag and started packing. Not because I had to. She was the one who was supposed to leave, but because I couldn't stay here a second longer than I had to. The apartment reeked of her skin cream and memories I no longer trusted. Every room was a crime scene. Every drawer a potential trigger. I packed light, just the basics. A few shirts, jeans, chargers, passport, the book I never finished reading. I was almost done when I got to her closet. I didn't mean to open it. I just stood in front of it, unsure why I hadn't touched it yet. Maybe some part of me thought she'd left something. Maybe I was hoping to find an apology folded into a sweater or a note tucked into a shoe. What I found was neither. At first glance, it was just clothes. Dresses, blouses, the same overpriced heels she never let me comment on. But as I moved things aside, a box slid forward from the back of the top shelf. A simple gray box with no label. I almost didn't open it. I already had enough answers. But curiosity is a strange thing. It doesn't care what's good for you. Inside the box were photos. Dozens of them. Printed. Not digital. Not stored on a cloud. Not backed up. Actual, physical photos. Glossy. Intentional. Which meant they were kept on purpose. I pulled out a few and flipped through them like I was peeling off layers of skin. Jules. With Dorian. Not just at work. Not just out to dinner. But on vacations. Together. Smiling. Laughing in cafes. Wrapped in towels on hotel balconies I'd never seen. There was one of her asleep on his chest, sunlight on her face. And one of them kissing under a string of lanterns, clearly in some foreign city. Paris? Lisbon? I didn't know. What I did know was, they were happy in these pictures. Unapologetically happy. And I wasn't even a shadow in them. But that wasn't the worst part. At the bottom of the box, underneath the stack of glossy betrayal, was something else. A letter. Folded. Addressed to him. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Then I opened it. The letter was handwritten. Neat. Emotional. Honest in the way people are when they think no one else will read it. In it, Jules wrote about leaving me. Not just thinking about it, planning it. She mentioned timelines, apartments she'd looked at, a conversation she had with her lawyer in case Merrill becomes difficult. She talked about how hard it was to lie to my face, how guilty she felt when I'd make dinner and ask her how her day went. But the most painful part wasn't what she wrote. It was the date on the letter. 10 months ago. 10 months. She had been planning this for almost a year, long before I knew anything, long before I ever suspected. So all those nights I thought we were reconnecting, all the effort I made to salvage us, it was already over. She just hadn't told me. I put everything back in the box, taped it shut, labeled it truth. And I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there, holding that box like it weighed nothing and everything all at once, and I realized this wasn't heartbreak. This was erasure. She hadn't just cheated on me. She had replaced me in her future. And the worst part? She had made it look easy. I didn't know where I was driving until I was halfway there. The box sat in the passenger seat, duct-taped, sealed, still marked with the word truth in thick black Sharpie. It didn't rattle or shift as I turned corners. It just sat there, heavy in ways that didn't depend on weight. I had left the apartment 30 minutes ago with no clear plan, just the raw instinct that I needed to put this betrayal somewhere. Somewhere it couldn't keep following me. Somewhere it could do what it was meant to do, hurt someone else for once. And then I realized where I was going. Her parents' house. Jules's parents, Margaret and Hank, lived about 40 minutes outside the city in a restored farmhouse with floral wallpaper and a coffee pot that never turned off. They loved me. They adored Jules, obviously, but they always said I brought out the softer side of her. That she smiled more when I was around. That she seemed grounded, less chaotic. Margaret once pulled me aside and said, "Thank you for giving our girl a calm life." She didn't grow up with one. I didn't do it for them. I did it because I loved her. Foolishly. Completely. But now they deserved to know who their daughter had become. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, it was just past noon. A sunny weekday. Their porch was decorated with fake pumpkins and a fall wreath that looked like it had been glued together by someone named Cheryl at a church craft fair. I sat in the car for a few seconds, engine running, wondering if I was crossing a line. But the line was long gone. Burned. Torn up behind me. I grabbed the box and walked up the steps. Margaret answered the door in slippers, her eyes lighting up with the kind of warmth that makes everything worse. "Merrill, what a surprise." "Hi, Margaret. I won't stay long. I need to leave something for Jules." Her smile faltered slightly. She glanced behind her like she wasn't sure if this was a good time, then stepped aside and let me in. The house smelled like cinnamon and old pine. It always did. I walked into the living room and gently placed the box on their coffee table, careful not to let it thud. Margaret looked at it, then at me, her smile gone now, replaced with something tighter, more maternal. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded once. "It will be." She didn't push. That's what I always liked about her. She read tension like a second language, but never asked the kind of questions that made it worse. Before I left, I handed her an envelope. "She'll know what it means," I said. It was a letter I had written that morning after packing. Not a revenge note. Not an angry rant. Just a simple recounting of what I knew when I knew it, and how she planned her exit like a military operation while I was still making her coffee and worrying if we were spending enough time together. I included photocopies of the photos. The letter to Dorian. I made it clean, organized, undeniable. At the bottom, I wrote, "I don't want to hurt you. I want to release you from the lie you've built. What you do next is yours to own." Margaret didn't ask what was in the letter. She held it like it was warm and nodded softly. When I got back to the car, I felt something strange, peace. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Just a thin layer of quiet under my ribs that hadn't been there in weeks. But it didn't last long. Because when I got back to the apartment that night, something was wrong. The front door was cracked open. Just slightly. Not kicked. Not broken. Just open. Like someone wanted it to look like nothing had happened. I stepped inside slowly. The lights were on. My duffel bag was gone. The box of kitchen knives was on the table. "Open." I called out her name, once. No answer. I moved through the apartment room by room, heart pounding, every instinct on high alert. Then I saw it. In the bedroom. Not Jules, but a note, pinned to the pillow with one of the knives from the kitchen. For words. "You weren't supposed to." That's it. No name. No signature. Just that. And suddenly, the whole story flipped again. because now I wasn't the only one watching. I stood there staring at that note for so long that I forgot to breathe. My first thought was irrational, that Dorian had come back, that maybe he'd crossed some kind of boundary neither of us realized existed until now. But no, this wasn't him. This wasn't even Jules. Because the handwriting, it wasn't hers. And that's when the fear shifted into something else entirely. Confusion. I paced the apartment for 20 minutes, checking everything twice. Doors, windows, drawers, closets, all untouched. Nothing missing. No signs of forced entry. Whoever had been here, they'd let themselves in quietly and left the note in a place I couldn't miss. And the knife? That wasn't a threat. It was a symbol. Jules always said kitchen knives were too intimate to be casual. I didn't understand it then. I do now. I took the note, sealed it in an envelope, and locked it in the drawer with the second phone. I didn't need answers anymore. Not from her. Not from him. Not even from whoever had left it. I already had what I came for, clarity. And that meant I could finally start living a life that didn't involve decoding someone else's secrets. The next few days moved slowly but without pain. I returned to work, told people we had separated, and most didn't ask why. I didn't volunteer it. The fewer people who touched that wound, the easier it could close. Jules didn't come back. She didn't text. She didn't email. I didn't reach out, either. That chapter had closed itself the moment she let him follow her into our apartment like I was already gone. Nina checked in a few times. She offered me her couch if I needed it, but I told her I was fine. Eventually, I met her for coffee on a rainy Saturday. It wasn't a date. Just two people who had survived the same fire, warming their hands on what was left. And then came the moment I didn't expect. I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. No name. Just a blank envelope with my name on it. Inside was a short note. I thought I was saving myself. But I wasn't. I was only erasing you. I see that now. I hope one day you forget me in a kind way. It was Jules. There was no plea for forgiveness. No take me back. Just truth. Quiet, fragile, late truth. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel hollow after reading her words. I felt done. Truly, finally done. That weekend, I went to the lake, a place I hadn't visited since we were newlyweds. I stayed in a small rented cabin. I brought no phones, no internet, just a notebook and a promise to myself. Don't spend the rest of your life remembering only what broke you. I wrote. I walked. I slept without grinding my teeth. And on the third day, as the sun dipped low across the water, I felt something return to my chest. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the fake kind you force in front of friends. The real kind. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that whispers, you're still here. You're still you. And that's enough. So no, the end of this story wasn't dramatic. No screaming match in a courtroom. No Hollywood confrontation. It ended with me, standing barefoot on a dock, breathing air that didn't feel borrowed anymore. She lost a husband. He lost the thrill. And I got my life back.